Arizona Territory. 1884, the wind slammed hard against the side of the barn, and the sky cracked open like it was angry at the earth. Maddox Ryland stood in the saddle, reins clutched tight, rain slicing sideways across his face. The storm had rolled fast over the desert, black and sudden. But he was not turning back. Not tonight. Not with her out there thinking he did not care. Not when her name had kept him awake for 3 nights straight. 50 miles was nothing when his heart had already gone the distance. A flash of lightning lit the ridge ahead, and he kicked his horse into a faster run. Tess. She had always been Tess Rourke to him, the only girl who ever mattered. The girl who used to patch up his scrapes when they were children running wild through dry creek beds, who had kissed him behind the church when they were 16 and left without a word 2 years later. Now she was back. Widow. Mother. And just as wrong for anyone else as she had ever been. The storm had not let up, not once, by the time he reached the farmhouse. Her lantern still burned in the window, dim behind the rain. His coat dripped as he dismounted and strode up to the front porch, boots squelching on the warped boards. He pounded once on the door. It opened too fast. Tess stood there, hair damp at the temples, a shawl clutched tight around her shoulders. Her face was pale, eyes sharp. Maddox. Her voice cracked the same way the thunder did. He stared at her, soaked through, chest heaving. I cannot sleep knowing you are not mine. She stared back at him. The air between them was thick, heavy with things unsaid. You rode through that? She asked, stepping out of the doorway, staring past him into the wet blackness. 50 miles, he said. I did not stop. She blinked, then looked at his face again like she was seeing something she had not let herself hope for. You should come inside, she said quietly. He followed her in. The warmth from the stove hit him like a wall. The room smelled of wood smoke and bread. A pair of small boots sat by the door, mudded from play. You got a child, he said gently. She nodded. 2 twins. They are asleep upstairs. He took off his hat, water dripping from the brim. Yours, mine, she said, voice firm. Their father left before they were born. Said he was going into town for lumber, never came back. He looked at her face, the tired strength in it. You did all this alone. I had to. She moved past him, folding her shawl and setting it on a chair. What are you doing here, Maddox? He stepped closer, the rain still thundering against the roof. I have not stopped thinking about you since the day you left. I thought I could let it go, but I cannot. You do not even know me anymore. I know enough. I know you are strong. I know you raised 2 babies by yourself. I know you are standing here looking at me like you want to believe this could be real. She looked down. You should not have come. Maybe not, he said, but I did. And I am not going anywhere unless you tell me to. Tess turned away, busying herself with the kettle on the stove. Her hands trembled just slightly. You always did show up when I least expected, she said, a faint smile tugging at her lips. Just like when you brought me that broken-winged hawk when we were 11, he chuckled, stepping closer. You fixed it. No, you did. You just needed someone to believe it could fly again. There was silence, soft and stretching. He reached out, brushing a strand of damp hair from her cheek. Let me stay, just tonight. She looked up, eyes searching his. To do what? To fix what I broke. She did not answer right away. Then she nodded, slow. You can sleep on the cot in the corner. They did not speak again as she fetched him a blanket and he peeled off his wet coat. But when she paused at the stairs, she looked over her shoulder. You were wrong, you know. About what? I never stopped being yours. Then she disappeared up the stairs. Maddox stood there, breathing hard, his heart thudding louder than the storm outside. He had come 50 miles through rain and wind and thunder for one truth. And now that he had heard it, he knew he was not leaving without her. Morning broke slow and gray over the high desert. Pale light sifted through the kitchen window. falling in slanted lines across the wood-planked floor. Maddox sat at the table, coat dry now, boots clean of mud, hands wrapped around a chipped coffee mug Tess had set in front of him without a word. Across the room, she moved with quiet efficiency, tying her apron at the waist and lifting a pan to the stove. The scent of bacon drifted through the air, thick and familiar. "You don't have to do that," he said. "I know," she replied, not turning. He watched the back of her neck, the way the morning light caught in the loose strands of her hair. "You always knew how to make silence feel like something," he said after a moment. She looked over her shoulder, eyes tired but dry. "You used to fill it just to hear your own voice. Maybe I talked so much because I was afraid of what I'd hear if I didn't." She didn't answer right away. Then she set the pan down on the stove and came to sit across from him, hands folded neatly in her lap. "You said you came to fix what you broke," she said. "What does that mean, Maddox?" He looked down at his hands, thick-knuckled and calloused, stained with old work. "I let you leave without asking why. I figured if you needed me, you'd come back. But you didn't. And I hated you for it, until I realized I'd never given you a reason to stay." Her gaze didn't waver. "I left because my father sold me to a man twice my age. I ran before the wedding could happen." His jaw tightened, but he didn't speak. "I went north. Found work with a family near Prescott. Then I met someone who said he'd marry me. I was 18, thought I could start over. You don't owe me, I'm not telling you for you," she said, voice even. "I'm telling you because you should know what kind of woman you rode 50 miles through a storm for." He looked her straight in the eye. "I already do," she swallowed, throat moving. "I was ashamed. That's why I didn't write. Everything I came from, everything I ended up in, it felt like a weight I couldn't ask anyone to carry. I ain't anyone." "No," she said. "You never were." The sound of small feet creaking across the floor above broke the stillness. Tess stood quickly, smoothing her skirt. "They'll be up soon," she said. "You should eat before they come down." He rose too, slow and steady. "You trust me enough for that." She turned to face him fully. "I don't have time for anything that isn't earned, but you came all this way. That counts for more than words." He stepped close enough to see the faint scatter of freckles across her cheekbones. "I didn't come for a place at your table, Tess. I know. I came because I still love you." She didn't flinch, didn't pull away, but she didn't speak either. A door creaked upstairs. The hurried sound of children's voices reached them light, high, tumbling over each other. Tess turned toward the stairs. "You can meet them," she said softly, "but don't say anything you don't mean. They've had enough empty promises." "I don't do empty," Maddox said, voice rough. She nodded once. "Then stay. We'll see what morning brings." He leaned back against the counter as she walked away, the clatter of plates and the patter of small feet filling the space she left behind. And for the first time in years, Maddox didn't feel like he was waiting for something to begin. He felt like he'd finally arrived. The children came down in a flurry of wool socks and tousled hair, their footsteps soft but sure on the stairs. Maddox stood still near the stove, hands loose at his sides. Tess didn't introduce him right away, just handed out tin plates with quiet efficiency, guiding the twins to their seats at the table. "Leela, Ben," she said, brushing crumbs from the table's edge. "This is Mr. Rylan. He's an old friend." Leela, the smaller of the two, with a mess of dark curls and a missing front tooth, squinted up at him. "You're tall." Ben, all elbows and curiosity, narrowed his eyes. "Are you a ranger?" "No," Maddox said, crouching to their level. "Just a ranch hand from down past the Dragoon Mountains." "Where's your horse?" Ben asked. "Out back under the lean-to. Name's Flint." "He don't like storms much." Leela leaned in, whispering loud enough for everyone to hear. "Mama said only important people ride during storms." Tess cleared her throat, setting down a crock of beans. Eat your eggs. Maddox took the seat she motioned toward. The chair creaked beneath him, familiar wood, worn thin by use. The children dug in without fuss. Tess moved through the room with practiced ease, but her glance kept catching on him, quick and unreadable. After breakfast, the children were set to their chores, gathering kindling and feeding the hens. Tess stood at the sink, sleeves rolled to the elbow, wrists red from the wash water. "You've got good ones," Maddox said from the doorway. He hadn't moved far since the meal ended. "They're their own people already," she said, drying her hands. "I just try to keep up." "You done more than that." She turned, resting a hip against the counter. "Why'd you wait so long to come? I thought you were gone for good." Then I heard from a freight driver passing through Tombstone that a Tess Rourke was living alone near Fort Huachuca with twins and a broken fence line. Her brows lifted just a little. "News travels crooked. Still got me here." She walked past him, opened the back door to let in the air. The storm had passed, leaving the ground damp and the sky soft with cloud. The scent of sagebrush lifted from the dirt. "I haven't had help in a long time," she said. "I didn't ride all this way to be help," he said. "But I'll mend what's broke while I figure out how to stay." She looked at him then properly, her face unreadable. "There's a roof leak over the girls' room. Floorboards near the hearth need reseating. I've a mule fence with more gaps than rails." He nodded once. "Then I'll start with the fence." She didn't smile. But she didn't look away either. By midday, he had his shirt sleeves rolled and a hammer in hand. The mule fence ran long along the south edge of the property, its rails warped from heat and time. He worked without pause, the steady rhythm of nails and wood giving his mind something solid to hold. Tess came out near sundown, a cup of coffee in one hand, shawl wrapped tight again. Her boots sank into the soft earth as she walked. "You missed supper," she said. "Didn't figure I'd earned it yet." She held out the cup. "You earned this." He took it, the warmth soaking into his fingers. "You always did know how to make a man feel bigger than he was." "I don't. But I see what's real." He looked at her closely, the way dusk lit the side of her face, how she didn't flinch when he stepped near. "I meant it, Tess. I didn't ride through that storm because I was lost. I rode because I finally knew where I was going. I don't need saving. I didn't come to save you, I came to be with you." She looked away, toward the line of mountains drawn dark against the sky. "If I let you stay, it's not for yesterday, it's for what you do with tomorrow." He nodded. "Then I'll make tomorrow worth it." She didn't answer right away, but she didn't walk away either. And when her hand brushed his as she took the empty cup, she didn't pull back. The next day dawned with a hush over the land, the kind that settles after hard weather dust dampened, air cool, sky stretched wide and pale. Tess stood at the edge of the porch, watching Maddox step into the corral with a coil of rope slung over one shoulder. He moved with the quiet certainty of a man used to work, his shirt clinging to his back where the morning sweat had already begun to gather. She didn't interrupt. Just watched him loop the rope around the mule's foreleg, calming the animal with a low voice before checking the worn leather of the harness. It was the first time in years she'd seen someone else care for something on this land who didn't expect a favor in return. "You always talk to animals like they're people?" she asked once he stepped back. "They listen better," he said, brushing grit from his palms. "Don't interrupt near as much." She stayed leaning on the rail. "You planning to keep fixing things?" "As long as there's something to mend." The mule snorted behind him, swishing its tail at a fly. "Then I hope you're patient," she said. "This place eats time like nothing else." "I've got time now," he said, catching her gaze. "And nowhere else I'd rather spend it." She looked away, jaw tightening. "I don't know what you expect from me, Maddox. Nothing you don't want to give. I buried a lot of things to keep going. Not all of them stayed buried." I'm not asking you to dig up the past, he said. Just to let me stand beside you while you walk forward. She didn't answer, but she didn't leave either. Later that afternoon, while the children napped upstairs and the wind stirred the curtains, Maddox took a seat by the hearth with a stack of split kindling. Tess sat across from him, mending a tear in Leela's dress, her needle moving steady through the faded lilac fabric. "You ever think about leaving this place?" he asked, not looking up from the blade he was sharpening. "No," she said. "It's hard, but it's mine. Could be yours somewhere with easier soil." "This soil knows my name," she said. "I've bled into it, buried things in it, raised children on it. I don't want easier, I want honest." He set down the knife. "That's what I came looking for, too." She tied off her thread, fingers brushing the hem smooth. "Why now?" "Because I've lived enough years with silence in my chest. I don't want another winter wondering if I could have had something steady." "I'm not steady," she said. "I'm scraped raw and some parts of me won't grow back right." "I don't need perfect," he said. "I just need real." The fire crackled low. Shadows moved across the floor, long and slow. "Ben asked if you'd be here for supper again," she said finally. "What you tell him? That it was up to you." "I'll be here," he said. She nodded once, then stood. "You'll need a better bed than that cot before long. I've slept on worse." "I'm not talking about comfort," she said. "I'm talking about permanence." He stood too, stepping close enough that their shadows touched. "Then let me build something permanent," he said. "Right here with you." She looked up at him, her face unreadable, but she didn't move away. "I don't want promises," she said. "I want days. One after another, honest and lived." "That's all I've got to give," he said, "but I'll give it every damn day." For the first time since he'd arrived, her hand found his, not in hesitation but with quiet, deliberate weight. She didn't speak, didn't need to. The sun dipped behind the ridge. The house settled into stillness again. And standing there, her fingers threaded with his, Maddox knew he wouldn't be riding anywhere else ever again. The days settled into rhythm. Maddox rose before the sun, his boots brushing the dew-wet grass as he walked the property line, checking each post he'd reset, each rail he'd reinforced. He kept Flint saddled near the barn. Not for travel, he had nowhere else to be, but to keep the horse limber, ready for the supply runs he'd started making into Huachuca for Tess. She never asked him to. He simply showed up with what was needed: flour, calico, salt block, a coil of fine thread for her mending basket. The children took to him as if he'd been carved from the place. Ben followed him through the field with a stick over his shoulder, mimicking the way Maddox carried fencing tools. Leela stayed closer to Tess, but her eyes tracked him constantly, quiet and curious, waiting for the day she'd decide he was safe. That day came 3 weeks in, when she brought him a handful of wildflowers wrapped in a torn scrap of muslin and asked him if he knew how to whistle. He did. Tess watched it all from a short distance, her expression unreadable, her movements always measured, but her shoulders had shifted. They no longer carried the same braced tension, as if she'd stopped waiting for something to go wrong. One crisp morning in late October, she found Maddox in the shed, hammering new slats for the chicken coop. She leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, a wool shawl drawn tight around her. The light behind her was gold and low. "Ben told me you showed him how to braid wire," she said. "He's got a good hand for it, careful, patient. He's been less restless lately." Maddox set the hammer down and wiped his palms on the leg of his trousers. "Children don't need much, just to know they're seen." She stepped inside the shed. "You never say much about your family." "Not much to say," he replied. "Ma died when I was a boy. My father drank himself into silence. I left before I could become like him." "You've got his name." "Just the name," she nodded, letting the quiet stretch. "Finally," she said, I used to think I was safer alone, but it's not safety if it costs you everything warm. He stepped closer, slow, always giving her space to move if she needed it. You don't have to be alone anymore. Her fingers curled around the edge of the workbench. I built this life with my hands. Every meal, every roof beam, every stitch. I didn't think it could hold anyone else. It holds me. She looked up at him, her eyes damp but steady. I want you here, not just for the chores and the children, for me. I want to know what it is to have someone stay. He didn't kiss her right away. He just reached up and cupped her jaw, his thumb brushing the edge of her cheek, like she was something solid and sacred. When she leaned into him, it was without hesitation. Later that evening, Tess stood at the stove while the children played on the floor. Maddox sat nearby, whittling a small horse from a scrap of cedar. Ben watched, wide-eyed, as curls of wood fell away. "You think it'll hold?" Tess asked, glancing over her shoulder. "What's that?" "This." "Us." He looked at her then, not smiling, not teasing, just honest. "Already does." By winter, the shed had been turned into a second sleeping room. Maddox had moved into the main house, not with ceremony but with quiet certainty. He built a second bed frame for the children, gave Tess his mother's silver hair comb, and started carving a cradle for the neighbor's newborn as a gift. He and Tess shared the same bed now. She still slept light, waking at the creak of the wind or the shift of the stove's heat, but her hand always found his in the dark. And he always held it. On Sundays, Maddox rode with Tess and the children to the small chapel farther down the valley. He never cared much for sermons, but he liked how the morning light hit Tess's hair through the high windows, and how Leela leaned against his arm during hymns. One cold afternoon in January, he came back from town with a folded paper tucked in his coat. He handed it to Tess at the table while the children napped upstairs. She opened it slow. "Marriage license," he said simply. "Only if you want it." She stared at the paper, then at him. "I already call you mine. Then let's let the world call me yours too." They married the next week. The neighbor woman brought bread. The preacher's wife stitched a ribbon into Tess's Sunday dress. The children picked dried flowers and lined them across the porch rail. There was no music, no crowd. Just the four of them, standing in the same place where Maddox had once knocked on her door soaked to the bone. He kissed her after the vows, his hands cradling her face like it was something fragile and fierce all at once, and she didn't hold back anymore. Years passed. The house grew in fits, an extra window here, a lean-to there. Maddox taught Ben how to shoe a horse and Leela how to hold a knife steady when slicing bread. Tess planted herbs behind the barn and lined the shelves with jars filled from their earth. No one went hungry. No one left. The land never got easier, but it got fuller. One spring morning, Tess stood on the porch, a baby slung against her hip, watching Maddox chase Ben and Leela through the tall grass. The children shrieked with laughter, and Flint trotted lazy circles behind them. She rocked the infant gently, breathing in the scent of wild wind and sun-warmed wood. Maddox looked up and caught her eye. She didn't wave. She didn't speak. She just smiled, wide and sure. And he smiled back, every line in his face soft with the kind of joy that only comes once you've earned it. They were home. Together. And always would be.